Well, thank you everybody who is joining us. I am Dave from Synology, and I'm going to talk about complete backup for Microsoft 365 and kind of how we can make that easy for you and kind of why it's necessary and why you would want it, why it's going to be a necessary addition to what you're working with already. So I mentioned I'm Dave Russ. I'll be the speaker throughout the presentation today. We also have Sarah in chat. She's going to answer questions if you do have any text questions that you want to ask to Sarah. And yeah, so I am a senior technical account manager at Synology. I've worked with hundreds, probably at this point thousands, of different companies, really getting them set up with both the hardware and the software to both check all their boxes, fill all their requirements, but also we're very inexpensive. So, fitting their budget is, of course, a big consideration. And I love doing it. So I want to talk to you about a specific customer that we worked with that we got set up with a Synology solution, which once again checked all of their boxes. So we had a vocational college that has 18,000 students and 1,000 faculty. And they were using a ton of Microsoft 365. And so they needed to back up this data. They had 30,000 Drive accounts, 60,000 email accounts, and this was across 10,000 different sites. And so part of the reasons why they needed to back this up is, first of all, they had legal obligations. They had to retain student and staff data for a certain amount of time. I think in this case, it may have been 2 to 3 years that they had to keep all this data. So that's the reason for the discrepancy between the number of students and faculty and the number of accounts that they did end up having to back up. And they really realized during the pandemic that they were relying on cloud data, that they were relying on their M365 platform to kind of carry them, through the days and weeks. So let me go ahead and, sorry, something just popped up on Teams. With them realizing that, they realized, okay, it's very important for us to get this information backed up. So that's why they started looking for a solution. And they realized that cloud was not backup. A lot of people who use Microsoft 365, they think, oh, it's up in the cloud, so we're good forever, no problem. When in reality, that is not any sort of guarantee. And honestly, it can do more harm than good having that kind of, you can have files that are deleted. You can have things that are edited and they shouldn't have been. And the real concern is, if you have, let's say, admins who empty recycle bins and clean things up regularly, you could delete a file and then 30 to 45 days later, it could just be completely gone. So it's definitely worth, thinking about what kind of options you have to back up all of your important data. So what this vocational college did is they got a Synology device and they used it as an on-prem backup for all of this M365 data. And this allowed them to satisfy all those retention goals. Like I said, they had a legal requirement to keep a lot of this data for multiple different years. And it reduced their IT effort. And what I mean by that is it allowed them to keep all of this data in one place, and they were able to integrate the Synology device with their domain. So all they had to do was go into the control panel and join the device to their domain so they could use their users and groups, and they didn't just have to reset all of that up. So that was a big win for them. And they saved money on fees. So there are no software licenses or subscriptions. There's no strings. There's no nothing. Once you purchase the Synology device, you get your hard drives, you're good. I mean, you set that up, and you're golden. I mean, this is definitely not the industry standard for this type of backup. Normally it is you have to pay monthly, and it ends up over the long term being a lot more expensive than it would to just get a physical device and then take care of it yourself. So let's talk about why it's necessary to back up your Microsoft 365 data. Like I said already, cloud is not a backup, but I want to specifically talk about Microsoft and how Microsoft details out their expectations. So this is their responsibility matrix. And as you can see down towards the bottom left, anything that's in gray is something that Microsoft says, yes, we are taking responsibility for this. This is our problem to deal with. So, for instance, applications, right? So they are, I should say, SaaS applications like Microsoft 365. So they're saying we're going to keep these up. We're going to make sure that they run, and that is you are 0% responsible for specifically the M365 as a platform, of course. But as you get to the top left, for Microsoft 365, your information and data is entirely up to you. So, you're storing that information up on M365, but if something happens to your data, whether that is a user deleting something, whether that is technically even something that Microsoft screws up, you are still responsible for your data. They can't be held liable if your data goes down, if it's not available, and whatever else. So it's really up to you to protect all of this information. And I want to read a specific line from their terms of service. They say, we recommend that you regularly back up your content and data that you store on the services or store using third-party apps and services. So they're specifically calling out, hey, this is up to you. You need to back up your data. It's not our fault if something happens to that information. So keep that in mind, when we're talking about this stuff. So here's just three of many different possibilities for why you would need this backup data. So first of all, I've already kind of mentioned it a few times, accidental deletion. User error is, in my experience, something like 80% of things that go wrong. People mess up. I mean, it's human nature, and you just have to be prepared for it. So with most data on M365, there's a 30-day retention period. And imagine somebody gets an important invoice and they accidentally delete that email, and then they don't realize it until a month later. Well, it's gone. I mean, there really is. There's a 14-day period where you could potentially contact Microsoft support, and they might be able to get that back. After that 14 days, it's just over. I mean, the data is just gone. So it's very, very important to have this backup, and it's very inexpensive, all things considered, to back up this stuff. So next, I want to talk about ransomware attacks. So the first thing I'll say is, I think we used to think of ransomware attacks as just attacks that targeted small networks that really didn't have much of a chance of hitting us specifically. But they've really evolved in the past couple of years, and especially throughout the pandemic. I think it was the FBI came out with a statistic that there's been a 75% increase in cybercrime, including ransomware attacks, probably mostly fueled by ransomware attacks. And I mean, it's massive. And if I recall correctly, the average ransomware that is actually paid, of course, you don't want to get in that situation, but it's about $100,000 for businesses who are trying to buy back their data. The Colonial Pipeline just paid $5 million the next day after they got hit by ransomware because they knew they didn't have backups for that data. So they needed to get that data back. And you don't want to be put in this situation in the first place. You want to have these backups and you just want to be in a solid situation. So. Um, Retention regulations is the last thing that I wanted to mention. We touched on this with the vocational college. You might actually be legally required to keep some of this data, so you might as well get ahead of that. And you might need to keep it for multiple years. So best to get started now on that type of thing. So let's get started. So I want to show you what it looks like to back up your Microsoft 365 data. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to think about the hardware. So Synology devices come in all shapes and sizes. We've got little 2-bay devices. I've got a little 2-bay device sitting right next to me over here. And we scale all the way up to, we've got 16-bay devices, but we've got devices that can scale up to over a petabyte of storage. We support up to 16 terabyte hard drives. So really, we kind of fit any situation. And that's true both for the amount of capacity and the performance. So, we've got little Celeron processors in some of our smaller devices, all the way up to Intel Xeon processors. We've got 12-core Intel Xeon processors in some of our devices. We've got dual 8-core Xeon processors. So really, we've got everything in between as well. So we'll have something to fit what you're looking for. And as far as software is concerned, Disk Station Manager is the operating system on all of these Synology devices. And there's over 100 different packages that you can download to manage your data, to back up your data, to really fit exactly what you need that to do. So let's talk about one of those packages, which is going to be the focus of this presentation, which is Active Backup for Microsoft 365. So this is the actual piece of software that is going to allow you to pull everything from M365 to your local Synology device. It does support OneDrive, SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, and Teams. And once again, there's no additional license fees. There's no subscription fees, nothing like that. So you won't have to worry about, paying month after month after month just to keep this service. You've just got everything taken care of, and you're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and start up a demo and show you what this looks like. Okay, here we are. And there I am sharing my screen. Okay, so jumping right into this, I'm going to open up Active Backup for Microsoft 365, which is that software I just mentioned. And it starts us off in the Overview tab. So in the top left, we can see all of the protected services and the number of users that we're protecting that service for. In the top middle, you can see a backup summary of the last 5 weeks worth of backup data. So, for instance, all of these actually are showing that they were completed with some skipped items. So if everything went through without any skipped items, it would just be a green circle. In this case, this is just a warning saying, hey, there could be something wrong. You might want to check this out. And you can click into this, and it will actually bring you straight to that warning in the log. And you can click in even further, and you can figure out, okay, what exactly happened here? Okay, there were certain different things that failed on maybe some specific services. So definitely something that will alert you to any possible danger. And I didn't mention there would be, if there was a catastrophic issue, you would see a red circle with this exclamation point. So these are all, once again, just warnings. If you ever canceled a backup task, it would also go ahead and show you this orange, just in case. In the middle here, you can see the service usage. So in this case, almost all of our data is stored with Drive. You can use this to figure out what's actually taking up most of your space. And then on the right, we've got our specific users. So we can see that Jon Snow is taking up 205 gigabytes. He is by far the the heaviest user. This is the demo account that we use all the time, so that is why this is so big. But this would give you an idea of if there was a couple specific users who were using way too much data, you could go give them a talking to and make sure that they are responsibly using M365, and they're not screwing anything up. So. And then in the top right, we can see that we currently have a task running. So I'm going to go into our task list, and here is that task. And if, let's say, we wanted to create a brand new task, we could go into Create right there, create a new backup task, and click Next. And we've got some information that we need to fill in here. So we need our tenant ID, application ID, certificate file, and certificate password. So that might seem daunting to start, but all I have to do is click into this tutorial, and we walk you through everything. Let me make that a little bigger for you. So this is just a step-by-step tutorial on what you need to do, what you need to information you need to gather, either from Microsoft 365 or just to create the certificate file that I mentioned, and then you will generate you will put in a certificate password for that certificate file. So this is, once again, just step-by-step instructions. It runs you through everything, and yeah, you're good to go once you set that up. So that will get you through the hard part here. And I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this since we do have a task already created, and I'm going to go to Edit. And I'm going to show you some of the more specific things that you can do once you do have that task created. So you'll get a list of all of your users here. And as you can see, we've got our M365 services as well. So if you want to go ahead and back up the drive for every single one of your users, you can just click that. Same thing with mail, archive mailbox, et cetera, et cetera. Or if you have specific users that you want to back up all of their data, go ahead and select them, and you're good to go. Of course, you can mix and match and choose whatever you want for each of these users. Same thing with groups here. You can go ahead and back up entire services. You can back up entire users. That's pretty self-explanatory. And speaking of self-explanatory, SharePoint sites is just, do you want to back them up, yes or no, and check them off as needed. And auto discovery service. So this is an interesting one. So auto discovery service is essentially, it is if you have a new user group or SharePoint site created within Microsoft 365, it's going to automatically back up whatever data you want, right? So in this case, we have Drive, Mail, and Contacts backed up for all of our new users. We don't have any group data that is updated here, and then we have just our just the site backing up for the SharePoint sites. So what I typically recommend is back up more than you feel like you'll need with this auto discovery service. You can always go back and go to user, and you can say, never mind, I didn't want to back up that particular user or that particular SharePoint site. So it's best to kind of be safe and sort of over protect yourself, if that makes sense. And like I said, you can always go back and remove some of the data. And then in our policy tab, we have our backup policy. So this is whether you want to do a continuous backup, and what that'll do is throughout the day, it will back up all of your data. So within a few minutes, it says right here, it's going to run automatically, and then if you make a change to one of the files, it's going to just automatically sync that to the Synology device. You've got manual backup, which will only trigger if you click this backup button when you're on the task. And then you've got your scheduled backups, which you can just run during off hours. And I'll show you what this looks like. So you can set your schedule, and you can pick specific days that you want it to run on. Some people like to only run it on the weekend, for instance. You can do it that way. Or, you can do it every single day. And then just you can actually pick a specific date that you want it to run on as well. And then once again, you've got a frequency up to every hour. You can back this data up with the scheduled backup. And the last thing I want to talk about here is the retention policy. So you can either preserve all of your versions, or you can keep a specific number of days to keep those historical versions. So for instance, if you were, once again, legally required to keep everything for an entire year, and you needed to be able to have specific days within that year, this is how you would do that. So yeah, that is pretty much it. So once again, we've got our backup task. We've got all of this information from M365 that is actually being pulled to the Synology device. And that is how you get all that information to that local device. So let me go back into the slideshow here. All right. So once again, we've got we've got all of our data backed up to the Synology device. How do we get it back, right? It's not enough to just have that information backed up somewhere, although that is, of course, the most important. How do we get that information restored back to M365? So the answer is that we've got a few different ways that you can do that, actually. So you've got bulk or granular restoration, meaning you can select multiple files or folders that you want to actually restore, or you can just choose very specific files. And then you've got two options to actually restore the data. So you can restore it directly to Microsoft 365, or you can export it to your local device. So I'll show you kind of what that looks like in a moment. And you can also set up your users, depending how much you trust your users. Like I said, user error is potentially a big thing. So if you do trust your user, or if you trust specific users, you can give them access to restore their own information. So it'll take a load off of what you need to do, and reducing IT effort is once again kind of one of the goals here, is allowing users to take control of their own information and restore as needed without having to put in support tickets. Nobody wants to deal with these kind of low-level types of tickets. So here we go again. I'm going to go ahead and jump into another demo of what it looks like to actually recover this data. So we are back in Disk Station Manager here. I'm going to click into Active Backup from Microsoft 365 Portal. So it'll open up a new tab for me here. And it goes ahead and it puts me in the first user here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually search for a specific user, John Snow, who we mentioned earlier. He's the data hog. And as you can see, it starts us off in the drive here. So this is John Snow's drive. You can see all of the restorations that have taken place, and then a whole bunch of other demos and folders and everything like that. So we've got all of this data. I'm going to actually switch over to a different service. So in the top right, I'm going to go to Service, and then I'm going to go to Mail. And I want to point out down at the bottom here, we've got our different backups. So this is our timeline. So for instance, we had a backup all the way back here on the 3rd, and on the 2nd, it looks like. And this is how we go back in time. So once again, we imagine that a user deletes an email, and they need to go ahead back and actually grab that email from some point in the past. That's how you do this. You go ahead back to that previous time, and then you find the email, you make sure that it's what you need, and then you can go ahead and restore that. So I was talking to John the other day, and he was talking about elves. There was some type of email about elves that he wanted me to look into. And so I'm going to go ahead and search for elves. And as you can see, we absolutely have some kind of email about elves here. But I want you to notice that neither in the subject nor the body of this email is the word elves. And the reason why this still came up when we searched for elves is we actually searched through the attachment And we found this PDF because the PDF is just swarming with elves. It's got elves all over it. And that's how we were able to find this. So I just wanted to kind of show off that feature. That's super useful. I can't tell you how many times I get emails from people where they just send me an attachment. They don't put anything in the body. They put like test in the subject. So it's a super useful search feature to have there. And speaking of search features, if we click right here, the little magnifying glass, we can actually get even more specific. So we can specifically search for who an email was from, who an email was to. We can look specifically in the subject. As you can see, our generic keyword just that I put up here just goes in this keyword section. And then we can have a specific date range. We can also only search for emails that do have an attachment attached to them. So that's another pretty useful feature as far as that's concerned. Now, we found the email that we want. All we have to do is go ahead and check that email, and we can click restore, and it shows us the destination folder that is actually going to restore to. So we can see that. If I were to click OK here, it's going to start restoring that information, and it's going to create that folder so that we can grab that right out of M365. Now, I also want to show you that there is an export option. So like I mentioned, in the previous slide, you can also export. So what this will do is it will bring up a Windows Explorer option. So it'll just be like a download. If you're downloading something else off the internet, it's just going to download it straight to your local computer, whichever you're browsing from at the time, and then you're good to go. So you've kind of got both options. I do find that people, a lot of times they do prefer to export to their local device and then email or chat, one of these files or emails directly to the person who's asking for it. Or they if they're doing it for themselves, they might immediately need to use it. So it's nice to kind of have both options with that restoration. And I am going to jump back into our slideshow here. Okay. All right, so we've got our M365 to our on-prem backup. We know how to restore back to M365 from that on-prem backup if we need to. We got to prepare for other disasters as well. We got to be ready for something that might happen to our local backup, whether that is a flood, some kind of natural disaster, depending, what might happen, a tornado, something like that, or honestly, just user error. There could be some issue. Somebody could, yank out the power cable. There could be a fire. I mean, there's a million different things that could happen to a single device. And if you're protected with multiple devices, you're going to be a lot safer, and your data is going to be a lot safer. So I want to talk about going to a secondary backup. And typically you'll want to have this secondary backup be at least 15 miles away from the first backup, and hopefully not, basically just not likely to be affected by the same thing that first backup. So once again, I mentioned a tornado. You'll want to make sure that if the one gets hit, the other one's far enough away that that same tornado or that same flood or whatever else is not going to affect the secondary backup. So the software that we will use to protect and to send this data to the offsite device is snapshot replication. So this is what it does actually is it allows you to take snapshots on your local device. So when it says protect data on Synology NAS, that's what it's doing. You're protecting the local data. You're creating versions of your data up to every 5 minutes. You can take snapshots as frequently as you want. And then you can also customize the retention policy to fit what you actually need. So typically what I see people do is, you want at least the last, let's say, 12 hours worth of changes to your data. And then you can, as you go back in time, keep a little bit less data as you go farther back. So maybe you'll keep one yearly backup just to, have something from last year that's still around. And then maybe you'll keep one backup for every month. So I'm getting a little bit too wordy here, but you can customize it to whatever you need that to be. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second when we demo snapshot replication. So once again, what snapshot replication is doing is it's taking these local snapshots that you took and it is copying them to your remote device. So in this situation, we've got a 4-bay device at location A, and we've got a 4-bay device at location B, but you've got flexible architecture options. So you don't need to have this be an exact, copy of it doesn't have to be the exact same device. What you could do is you can have a primary backup, let's say this is at your HQ, which is taking all that information down from M365. And then you can snapshot to 2 different locations if you want to. And they, once again, don't have to be the same exact type of device. Another thing that I see sometimes is, let's imagine the opposite scenario. One second here. So let's imagine the opposite scenario where each of your branch locations want to back up some of their data. And then they want to also snapshot and replicate that data to your headquarters. So you could have this, this big, up to over a petabyte worth of data at your headquarters. And then you can have all of your branch sites backing up their data, backing up their workstations potentially, and then sending all of that data to your headquarters so that they've got some sort of disaster recovery plan if something were to happen to their local branch. So all good things to think about. And I want to go ahead and dive into what snapshot replication looks like. So let me jump into that. And so we're just jumping back into Disk Station Manager once again and opening up snapshot replication. Now, once again, there's a warning here, and it's absolutely a fantastic thing because you want to know if something is going wrong with your device. And once again, you can just click into details here and you can see a connection failed. So the each of these replication tasks, they show you what device they are backing up to. So this specific device must be having either some type of issue, maybe it moved, and these are demo environments, so things change around all the time. So, but it's fantastic for you to know, what's going wrong potentially. You can also, in this overview tab, see how much data is actually being replicated to another site, how much is we're taking snapshots of on this local device but not replicating, and then how much data is actually on the device but doesn't have any type of protection set up for it. So let me show you a little bit more about what that looks like if we go into this snapshots folder. So you can see all of our shared folders on this device. You can see which ones are replicated, which ones have scheduled snapshots locally, and which ones don't have any type of scheduled protection. Now let's imagine we did want to schedule some sort of protection on this device. So all we'd have to do is select the specific shared folder. We would click Settings, and then Enable Snapshot Schedule, and then we can choose how frequently we want this to back up. So yeah, sorry, I wanted more options to show you. You can do this up to every 5 minutes. And then retention. Retention is another thing that we talked about. This is currently set to always retain snapshots. That's I believe that's the default for when you are setting this up. But you can pick a specific number of snapshots that you want to keep, or you can go into the advanced retention policy. And once again, you can set this up so that you've got 12 hourly snapshots, right? So the last 12 hours that you have, those will all be kept. 3 daily snapshots, 1 weekly snapshot. You can make this your own. Whatever your risk tolerance kind of supports, you can set it up in a way that's going to fit your business the best. So I'll cancel out of this. I will mention that you can also take individual snapshots. So let's imagine I just wanted to take one snapshot at this point in time. I didn't want to set up a schedule. You could select the folder, you could go to snapshot, and you could click take a snapshot. And then you're good to go. I'll also mention that you can go into snapshot list, and that'll show you all of the different versions that you've taken. So this is taking daily snapshots of this particular folder. I'll go into that more in just a second here. So if I go into replication, this is where we're taking that local snapshot and we are pushing it off to the remote device. So let's say I wanted to create a brand new one. So I'd go into create and I'll click next. And so the local option here would be if you wanted to actually locally replicate the snapshot. It's a little strange to think about, but the idea is that you could set up, let's say, 2 RAID groups on a single device, and you can just replicate that snapshot over to the other RAID group. It's kind of just another way to protect yourself. It's pretty rare in my experience that people want to go that route, once again, because going to a remote site is going to protect you more. It's going to protect you from more possibilities, once again, fire, flood, whatever else. So we're going to click remote and go next. And we would then just put in our server name, or more likely IP address for the destination server that we wanted to send all this data to, and then our username and our password. And that's it. You just click next. If you need to go into more detail, if you've got specific port settings or firewall settings, you can click into the advanced settings at the bottom here, and then you can switch up the port information for the DSM login and for the port for shared folders and advanced LUNs if you're using LUNs and you're snapshotting those. So just keep that in mind. If you get the Synology device and you're having any issues with any networking stuff, that's all you have to do. Just come in the advanced settings and go ahead and make sure that you've got the ports figured out correctly. So we've already got a few tasks that we have created, and if we were to click into one of them, so let's do the active backup for M365, which is all of the data that we just backed up and we wanted to replicate. So I'll click info, and what you can see here is the source server, this is the device that we're currently connected to, and the destination server. So this is the device that we are replicating to. We can see the last successful run, when that went, and then the next time it's expected to run. And if we go into statistics, we can see the last successful runs and how long they took. So we did have this one take an hour. Typically, what will happen is when you send over a ton of information, which is what this bottom section is showing, it's showing how much data was actually sent during that time. That snapshot is going to take a longer period of time. But then once you've taken that snapshot, typically it's going to be a few seconds that it's going to take, depending how frequently you are taking these snapshots. It's only sending over the changed data because it's an incremental backup. So typically you'll have one big successful run that is sending over all the data. And then from that point on, let's say you take hourly backups. Since it's only sending the change data, it's really not going to take very long to send that data over. So I'm not sure if I went into this already, but if we were to, sorry, I did. We did create or show what it would look like to create a new one. Now we have to go into what it would look like to actually recover that data. So imagine that we sent the data to that offsite. How do we get that data back to our local site? And one thing that I'll have you notice here is we can see our scheduled snapshot folders as well. So we can see whether the folder is replicated to the offsite, but we still might need to recover a previous version of our local snapshots as well. So that's all in this one tab. But once again, we're looking at our active backup for O365, M365 data. And so what we could do here is select it and click recover. And this will once again show us all of the different versions of the backup that we have. So you can see, let's say we wanted to go back to the 12th. We wanted to see what data was there. All we'd have to do is select this and click browse. And this will actually allow us to go through these folders and just see what data existed on the 12th in, in this snapshot. So, or I should say on the device at that time. So this is actually just keeping all of that data, for you to view at a later time. So let's imagine I look through, okay, task 3, that's the folder that I wanted to make sure was there. And I'm ready to restore to this previous version. So I'm going to select that, go to action, and I can just click restore to the snapshot, and we're good to go. We're getting all of that data back to our local device, and we're restoring to what everything looked like on the 12th. So that is pretty much it. Let me see if there's anything else. So yeah, I suppose I'll also mention in this action tab, you can do things like switch over. So what that is going to do is, right now, like I said, we're on our local device. So we are replicating to our destination server. If I click switch over, it's going to switch, and that destination server is going to act as if it's the local device. And then it's going to replicate to this device that we're currently on. Sorry, it's getting a little complicated, but I hope you're following here. So we could do that if we needed to, let's say, do maintenance on this device. We can switch over. We can point all of our, our DNS information, point all of our users to that other device, and they can just use the data on that other device, and they don't have to worry about anything. So there's a lot of interesting things you can do. You can test failing over to that secondary device, and there's an option to clean up those test failover folders and everything like that. So there's a lot of different stuff that you can do with these backups and when you are looking to recover them. All right, so moving on, let me go ahead back into our presentation. All right, so hopefully you are sold on the software. Hopefully those demos showed you it really is pretty dang easy to get everything set up on the Synology device. It's super user-friendly. And so now we got to pick out our Synology device. So what do you have to consider when you're actually looking to pick out the hardware? So first of all, how much data do you have? How many accounts, how many inboxes, and whatever other information you might have. How much are you going to actually have to put on the Synology device? So I'll include M365 in that. Most of the time, people use us as a file server. You might want to back up your other data. So Active Backup for Business, actually, you can back up your workstations, your physical servers. You can back up your virtual machines if you use Hyper-V or VMware. So there's a lot of different data that you can actually get onto the Synology device very, very easily. So consider that, and I would say leave some breathing room. Part of the reason you're going to want to leave breathing room, I'm going to go over a few, is your daily change data. So think about your retention policy. Think about how many different versions of that of those snapshots you're going to keep, because since you do keep those historical versions over time, all of those are going to take a little bit of extra data, right? So you start off with your big backup, that's all of your data, and then let's say you edit half of those files. Well, you might need to keep a decent amount more data. Now, this is block level, so it's not like, you have a 300 gigabyte file and you change a little bit in that file. It's not going to save a whole new 300 gigabyte file. But, there is definitely going to be some overlap, and there's going to be extra space that you're going to need um, because of changes that you're making to the information. Think about your retention requirements as well. So how many years do you actually have to keep this data for? Once again, you might be legally required to keep some of it, so definitely keep that in mind. And then future needs. So I recommend 3 to 5 years. You want to think about 3 to 5 years. Most of our devices have the ability to expand. So, for instance, our 12-bay devices, all of them can expand to at least another 12-bay expansion. So eventually you can get 24 total drive bays in all of them. In some cases, it's 36. In some cases, it is, once again, you can go out to 7 expansions over a petabyte worth of space that you could potentially get on there. So just keep that in mind. What I like to do typically is fill up 8 to 10 drive bays in a 12-bay device, and basically just leave room, because we've got fantastic expansion options in just a single chassis as well, where you can add a drive and expand your RAID group automatically. Our software takes care of all of it. So keep that in mind for sure. Now, you'll want to figure out how much data you have in M365. Like I mentioned, we've got a fantastic article on where to go to do that. So definitely check that out. Check out that article. The name of the article is How Do I Select a Synology Product for Active Backup for Microsoft 365? So definitely, Google that and find that to make sure that you're sizing the Synology correctly. And just to talk about a few different options for our hardware. Of course, we've got I think we're around 30, maybe a few more different models that we have that are currently active. But these are some winners. These are some devices that are used very, very frequently. So the DS920 Plus is a 4-bay device with an Intel Celeron processor, and it can support up to about 200 users. We've got our DS1621 Plus, which is a 6-bay device that can support up to about 500 users, and then the DS3617XS, that's in a higher category, a higher class of device, that can support up to about 1,000 users on that one. We've also got rack-mounted units, and actually, if you want redundant power on your device, which I do highly recommend, but typically power supplies are the things that will end up going first in, obviously not just in Synology devices, just in general. But yeah, so the RS820 Plus is a 4-bay device that's definitely on our lower range of what you might want to be looking at. That'll support up to about 200 users. The RS1221 Plus can support up to about 500 users. That one's actually got an AMD Ryzen processor, and that one's super affordable for an 8-bay device, 2U rack. And then our SA3600, this is actually the device that vocational college used, where they had well over 2,000 users. This has a 12-core Intel Xeon processor. This thing can take care of pretty much whatever workload you can throw at it. And this is actually the device that can expand out with 7 more 12-bay expansions. So definitely that's the heavy hitter. Go for that one if you've got a ton of space that you need to back up. So first, before we get into the Q&A, I want to mention that we do have a survey. I believe that should end up going into the chat. So definitely look out for that survey. And yeah, I am open for questions. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and I'm sure I rambled for long enough. I want to hear from you.